Welcome back to Neuro-Spectrum Conversations. Today, I am joined by Gabrielle Priar, founder of Little Wins Behavior Consulting in Evansville, Indiana. And today we are diving into conversations surrounding behavior, support, parenting, and the importance of understanding the why behind behaviors in children on the spectrum. I'm so excited for you all to hear Gabrielle's perspective and the work she's doing within the community. So with that, let's get started. Gabrielle, do you want to talk about your background and what inspired you to work in this field?
Sure. Yeah, I've been working in childcare for quite a while now. I started nannying a girl with special needs in high school, and that kind of started my love for this field. And ever since then, I worked either in like a daycare setting or as a direct support professional through the Indiana Medicaid waiver while I was in college. So I just kind of found a love for it then. I've always just been kind of intrigued into why people do certain behaviors. So that kind of led me to get into behavior consulting. I taught special ed for 4 years, loved that. And throughout my teaching career, I feel like I kind of dug more into behavior. So that's what led me into becoming a behavior consultant from there. And I really just wanted to start my own business where I could support families and parents in the community. So, yeah.
Okay, that's really awesome. It's hard to find people who have that passion to work with this kind of or work in this kind of field. So you have to be a very special kind of person. And the patience and the heart behind it, and it feels like you definitely have the heart behind it. So what are some services that your business offers to people who are interested?
Sure. Yeah, we offer a couple different things. The main thing that's offered to families and parents is virtual parent coaching and behavior consultation.
Mhm.
I call it parent coaching, but it's more, like I said, behavior consultation. So the virtual sessions are 1 hour. The first session is mainly an intake session where I'll ask different questions about your child and behaviors that they engage in. I'll
Mhm.
ask how they sleep, what do they eat, how much technology time do they have, things like that. And then from there, I'll provide you with behavior recommendations you can implement at home. I'll send you like a home behavior plan you can follow, along with some resources and visuals for your child if needed. So that's the main thing offered to families. We also do some virtual workshops on different topics. The one I'm hosting next is on the functions of behavior.
Mhm.
Um, I believe that is next Wednesday night, the 27th, I believe.
Mhm.
Um, and then in terms of consulting with the schools, I partner with some of the Catholic schools in the area, and I go in and observe some kiddos struggling with behavior and then meet with the teachers and principals afterwards to
Mhm.
give them behavior recommendations they can implement. I make materials, visual schedules, token boards, things like that. And then the last service that I offer is professional development sessions for schools as well, which I really love doing. I love just going and getting to talk about different behavior related topics. So, yeah, those are the three main things that I do with my services. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
I feel like this is not really something that's offered very often, especially in the area that you're in. Um, so do you offer just virtual, or are you hoping to kind of have your own, brick and mortar business?
Yeah, for the most part, I'll probably stick to virtual. I would like to do some in-person parent workshops or support groups, if I can find a space to do that. That's a goal that I have down the road, whether it's at, a local library or something like that.
Mhm.
But for now, the parent coaching and behavior consultation will be mostly virtual, and then the school consultation I'll continue to go in person. So, yeah, definitely a goal of mine, but that's what I'm gonna stick with for now.
Okay, yeah. That's totally fine. So, what gaps have you noticed in the community that led you to creating your business?
Yeah, I think the biggest gap that I've noticed, being a teacher and working through the Indiana Medicaid waiver and even being a registered behavior tech in an ABA center is that families just don't have access to these services. A lot of places in Evansville have wait lists. I feel like every time I call somewhere, they have a wait list. So I wanted to
Right.
just start a new business and
Hmm.
obviously, not have a wait list at first. So just give quicker access to parents um, for services. And then I know transportation can be an issue sometimes. So that's kind of the reasoning behind making it virtual. That way parents don't have to worry about that. They can do a session on their lunch break or, after dropping their kid off at school or things like that. So
Hmm.
that was one of the biggest gaps that I noticed. And I think that I wanted to make sure with my business, I don't have a cookie cutter approach. I want to give
Right.
individualized recommendations to families. And I like the one-on-one setting with parents virtually. I think that it just makes the recommendations a lot more personalized and
Mm-hmm.
um, I want parents to feel comfortable because I know that going into an office setting or a therapy setting can be intimidating or nerve-wracking for parents at times. So yeah, those were some of the biggest gaps is just like access to services. And of course, with all of the services that run through the state, it's hard. You don't ever really know what's going to happen. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to do something on my own.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't blame you. That's the biggest hurdle that we're trying to overcome within the Facebook
Mhm.
support group I made that you're also involved in. And I've seen where you kind of commented on a couple of parents' posts, like regarding their kids' behavior, trying to give them helpful advice, which I think that's awesome that you're still actively trying to help,
Mhm.
and offer your services if they would like that. Because I know that, I mean, even with my son, we have some pretty severe behaviors sometimes. He is still, a toddler.
Yeah.
But being a toddler on the spectrum just kind of adds that extra layer of, problems.
Mhm.
So everything is, he feels everything else on a whole other level.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
Definitely
definitely
understand that.
yeah, I definitely understand that. So what do you think is your overall philosophy or your approach when supporting neurodivergent children and their families?
Yeah, I definitely try to take a strengths-based approach. I think that my experience in the past with different service providers, at times it can accidentally be more focused on their weaknesses or deficits that they have. And obviously, sometimes we need to address things like that if it's a safety issue or it's hurting the child or things like that. We always want to keep them safe, but I do like to try to figure out what their strengths are and help parents address behaviors from that point of view.
Hmm.
So I focus on that a lot. And then, like I said, I definitely want to make the recommendations individualized to each child versus, recommending just some general behavior techniques to each family. I'd like to, take what the child likes to do and take what they're good at and then um, go from there. Like, for example, if there's a kiddo that loves dinosaurs, like, okay, we're going to make their token board dinosaur, something that they like or something they want to work towards. So I like to try to take that approach when giving suggestions. Um, I think I definitely try to think of it from like a least restrictive environment. I think that sentence
Hmm.
is like, ingrained in my brain from being a special ed teacher. So whenever I'm, answering questions from parents, I try to think to myself like, what's the least restrictive behavior recommendation, or like, what's the least restrictive environment that we can give the child. So yeah, I would say that's probably my general philosophy.
Hmm.
I feel like I definitely have some other ones, but I'm blanking.
Hmm.
But yeah, I would say those are the main things.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds really great. So what would be some common struggles that families come to you for support with in regards to their children's behaviors?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing um, is kiddos struggling to regulate themselves. I think that's the biggest thing I'm seeing nowadays. And of course, that can lead to a wide variety of behaviors. And I think the most common behaviors I see with a lack of self regulation is like physical aggression, verbal aggression, tantrums, throwing items, things like that. So, those are some common behaviors that parents will
Hmm.
come to me with. Or even like potty training issues, we can work on that as well. Um, Talk to families about nutrition, technology time, how to reduce technology time if their kid is having behavior issues with it. So those are the most common things.
Mhm.
So I definitely try to address the self-regulation piece first because that kind of naturally reduces all of those behaviors. But yeah, I would say those are the most common struggles, or even like inattentiveness and lack of focus when doing homework at home
Mhm.
or doing chores, things like that. Lack of
Mhm.
independence, things like that. So yeah, I'm super big on independence and getting kids to learn life skills at a young age. That way they, have them for the rest of their life. So I would say those are probably the biggest issues I hear from families.
Right. And then what do you think are some misconceptions that people often have about behavior support?
Um, it's a tough one. I think that in the past, when I would do in-person behavior support, I think that sometimes um, the pressure of quote fixing the behavior gets put on the service provider, and
Mhm.
it's really important that parents are a part of the um, behavior support and they're implementing the strategies recommended by the service provider. Like I said, that was whenever I was in person, and even now virtually. Like it's very important that parents are consistent. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is like, okay, I'm gonna try this behavior strategy for a week, and oh, it's not working. We need to find something else. So I make sure to remind parents like you have to stick with it to see if
Mhm.
it is going to work for your kiddo. It might take a month. I don't know. I can't really judge how long a behavior strategy might take to work. So that's definitely something that I address with families during sessions. Um, and then I think another thing that I hear in terms of like the self regulation piece is I'll have people say, oh, well, I tried to get them to calm down or do deep breathing when they were frustrated and they just wouldn't do it. So I try to reframe that and have parents teach their child self regulation when they are calm. So if we
Mhm.
can teach them those skills when they're calm and regulated, then their brain is kind of more used to those techniques, kind of like muscle memory.
Right.
Whenever you become escalated, it'll be a lot more easier for somebody to prompt a kiddo to do deep breathing if they've already practiced it when they were calm. So I think that's definitely one of the biggest things that I hear.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah. I know that there's quite a lot of misconceptions just in general with certain behaviors from neurodivergent children. It's it's very frustrating to hear when parents who don't have a child on the spectrum, they assume that these are manipulative behaviors
Mm-hmm.
from the child. I'm like, no, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
Their systems need to be regulated just like yours does to do your daily
Mhm.
functioning tasks, just in a different way because
Yeah.
they feel everything so much stronger than we do.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that that is something I have heard quite a lot, is that it's a manipulative behavior, and I do not agree with that whatsoever. But,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's hard to explain that to people who don't have a child on the spectrum or haven't worked with kids on the spectrum.
Yes, yeah, I've definitely heard that too. Like, I feel like in the past, I've heard people say, like, oh, they're doing that on purpose. They know what they're
Hmm.
doing, or, just kind of
Yeah.
um, comments like that. And
Yeah.
it really is a regulation issue and like a nervous system issue.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that is very
Yeah.
frustrating to hear.
It is. And I mean, most of the time, it's not really even from the parents. It's from, like I mentioned, parents of neurotypical children. They don't.
Mhm.
I was like, no,
Mhm.
that's not how that works. You
Yeah.
have to be a part of the club to truly understand. And I mean, even if the parents are like, their child is freshly diagnosed, they're still more open to understanding why the behavior happens and the functions of behaviors, and how that works in their kid. So
Yes. Mhm.
I feel like that should be given. And, every parent needs some kind of a workshop or education on functions of behavior in their children.
Yeah.
So what would you say are the four functions of behavior.
Yeah, the four functions of behavior, to me, are kind of the core of the behavior support that I'm able to give. I actually learned this whenever I was a registered behavior tech at an ABA center.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm so thankful I learned them because when I was in college to become a teacher, that was not something that we touched on very much. I don't know if we even learned it at all, to be honest. But the four functions of behavior, I always tell parents you can remember it by the acronym SEAT. So sensory, escape, attention, tangible. So a kiddo can be engaging in a behavior for sensory related reasons, either trying to escape a sensory feeling or have access to a sensory feeling. Escape would be, for example, a kiddo maybe trying to escape their homework. So maybe they rip their homework in half.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Attention is pretty self-explanatory. And then tangible would be a kiddo trying to have access to like a tangible item, iPad, TV, drink, snack, things like that. So of course, um, that can apply to any behavior. And sometimes even there can be one or two functions that apply to the behavior. So a kiddo might be trying to escape a behavior, and then as they're escaping the behavior, they gain attention from an adult, and then that makes them want to continue engaging in that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So I make sure to always mention that as well because it can have multiple functions to it.
Right. So, thinking of that acronym, what would be like some real life examples that parents may recognize?
Yeah, I think the one that comes to my mind first is I feel like attention can be pretty easy to recognize depending on the situation. But like if a kiddo is, throwing an item, they're playing with their toys, and you say time to pick up, and they look at you and make direct eye contact with you and throw the toy, and then you give them attention, and you notice that every day when it comes time to pick up, they're looking at you and throwing the toys. That's typically an attention-based behavior. They can be, even escaping having to pick up things like that, or maybe they want access to that tangible item, their toys.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's one of the common examples I think of. Um, I've had kiddos in the past that would avoid going to the bathroom, and sometimes it would even be for a sensory reason, like they didn't like something about the bathroom, or like the lights were too bright in the bathroom. So for clients in the past, like we would turn the lights off, and sometimes that would help. So that would be sensory. That would potentially be the function of that behavior. I'm trying to think of some other common examples. I know elopement is kind of a more um, what's the word I'm looking for? Elopement can be hard to find the function, depending
Right.
on the situation. It can be for many reasons. It can be escape. It can be that a child sees an item that they want. So maybe, in a parking lot, they elope and they run and they see, I don't know, a toy or a snack or something on the ground across the parking lot, and they want to have
Right.
access to it. So there's definitely um, just some different things that parents can look out for in terms of functions of behavior. But the important thing with functions of behavior is to try to think of that first before you respond to the behavior. So just like stop and pause and think, which of these four reasons could they be doing this behavior for? And then go ahead and address it from there. And it makes a world of difference. It definitely changed like how I even just like taught all of my academic lessons to my kids, and it really, really helped.
Right. So I mean, I believe that, all behaviors is some form of communication, in any kid. And, even with nonverbal children, any kind of communication that they can use, uh, you know, for their behaviors, that's what we're going to do because my son is
Mhm.
nonverbal. So a lot of what he does is a kind of nonverbal cues of communication for his behaviors. So why do you think that behaviors are communication? Like, does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. um, I would say that behavior is communication because, in examples like with clients in the past, if I have a kiddo that's non-speaking, and they are grabbing my shirt for my attention, they're
Mhm.
communicating to me that they want my attention. Or
Mhm.
I remember specifically a kid I used to work with. She would kind of like dig her feet into like the side of my leg to
Mhm.
get my attention, and that also communicated to me that she needed sensory input. So I think
Mhm.
that each behavior, like you're saying, is communication, and it can be communicating many different things even at once. I think
Mhm.
there are even examples where a kid would be tugging on my shirt and they wanted my attention, or they wanted me to help them open their snack, or things like that. So it's definitely important to think about that, and for me to mention to parents as a reminder whenever I'm working with them that it is communication.
Mhm.
You know, I think that that's just kind of how our brains work, to put it simply, is that's how we communicate, is what we do, and it can be what we
Right.
say, but for individuals that might be non-speaking, like their actions are how they're communicating. And I think that's something that society needs to look out
Mhm.
for as well, and be inclusive of that. I
Yeah.
think sometimes people can be judgmental, like while they're witnessing a behavior out in public, and it really is a child trying to communicate either I need something, or I have an issue. I feel sick. I'm in pain, or my nervous system is dysregulated. I feel like that's one that obviously somebody wouldn't normally think of when they see a kid engaging in a behavior in public. But I do think it's important to mention that
Mhm.
just to stop and think like, okay, what could that really be saying? What could that behavior really be
Right.
communicating? If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I took communications classes in college, and there was like a humongous section just for nonverbal communication between, adults. So I actually learned quite a lot about how, like, reading nonverbal cues from people and their behaviors. And I feel like that has definitely kind of shaped how I perceive people and interactions when I talk with them based on their nonverbal cues. So,
Hmm.
I could see where someone might not understand why my son leads me by my hand to something. Um,
Hmm.
or him grabbing my shirt, like you mentioned, with that one child. He does grab my shirt sometimes to get my attention. Sometimes he taps me, because he can't really tell me, he can't communicate with me what he wants. So,
Hmm.
and then that often leads to a meltdown because he can't tell me. So,
Yeah.
unless
Yeah.
I figure it out very quickly or I get those nonverbal cues, I'm like, oh, he wants to watch a movie. That's what he
Yeah.
wants to do.
Mhm.
Because he can't say, I want to watch a movie. So,
Mhm.
I feel like that's a very important component to understand when working with kids on the spectrum, especially in a behavior consulting business.
Mhm.
So what do you think would be or what have you heard that are common mistakes that these parents make when responding to behaviors?
Yeah, I think some common mistakes that just kind of come up, or came up first when you asked that, was kind of like what I mentioned before. Um, Maybe a parent is trying to teach their child self-regulation and techniques and coping skills while they're already escalated.
Right.
Sometimes at that point, like it's already too late. Their nervous system's already too dysregulated.
Hmm.
So it's really hard to like teach a new skill whenever your brain is in,
Hmm.
fight mode or flight, whatever. So I think that's one of the most common mistakes. And then, of course, like just responding first without stopping and thinking about, the function of the behavior, which is hard. I know it's just our human nature to just, respond to behavior or respond to whatever is happening in front of you. But I know, teachers or families that I've worked with in the past, like once they learn the functions of behavior and they kind of train their brain to stop and pause before they respond.
Hmm.
That seems to help them respond to behaviors a
Hmm.
lot better. I'm trying to think of what else common
Hmm.
mistakes. Kind of like what you mentioned earlier. Just have the mindset of like, well, this is manipulative, or they know what they're doing. And I think a better way to frame that is like there are learned behaviors.
Hmm.
um, we have them as adults. Like, okay, even as simple as I go to work, I get paid. That's a learned of
Hmm.
something we learn, a learned behavior.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that can also be a common mistake. Um, Not co-regulating, I think, with the child too can be a common mistake. I've had families in the past like will even admit like, I need to work on my self-regulation. I need to work on calming myself. Um,
Hmm.
I always remind parents like give yourself some grace. It's hard to be regulated all the time. Like I'm not regulated
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
Nobody is. We all could, probably learn some more coping skills.
Yeah.
It's something that I personally work on. So
Oh, yeah.
it's hard to do that when responding to behaviors, but I would say that's, a common mistake is just not knowing when to co-regulate, I guess. Sometimes when a child might be engaging in like a sensory related behavior where they're, avoiding being close to people, maybe, they need the lights dimmed, things like that. Like that wouldn't really be a time where we would want to go and get like super close to the child and, put our hand on their shoulder and say, okay, time to calm down. They may not want to be touched in that moment, I guess, if that makes sense. So,
Oh,
um,
yeah. Hmm.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. My son, when he's already escalated, we can't touch him or talk to him or anything because that escalates his behaviors even more. And I mean, I've had people tell me that I'm ignoring him and his needs and I'm not doing anything to help him. And I'm like, well, it makes it worse.
Yeah.
So we have to ignore
Mhm.
this because if we don't, he ends up hurting us or himself. And,
Mhm.
that's just how we've worked on that behavior. And that's the
Yeah.
best way that we've learned how to do it. So I'm not ignoring it. I am always
Mhm.
I'm present when he is having those emotions and that meltdown. So I
Mhm.
am there in the room. I just don't say anything. I wait until he's calm enough to
Yeah.
process what I am trying to say to him because with with his speech disorder, he can't understand what I'm saying when he is already escalated.
Mhm.
So, and he does not like being touched in general. He's a
Mhm.
very not affectionate child. He's affectionate on his own terms.
Mhm.
So, trying to get him to calm down or trying to, you know, redirect him to things is kind of difficult sometimes. So I definitely
Yeah.
understand that. And I mean, anything could trigger it. It could be anything. So
Mhm.
we struggle with that pretty much all throughout the day. It honestly depends on how his day is and how it sets up his whole entire week, pretty much. Because, if he has one meltdown one day, he'll have it for the rest of the week. So
Mhm. Yeah, that
learning
definitely makes
how to regulate myself has been a challenge,
yes,
but I am
it's
working
hard.
on it.
Yeah.
So I definitely understand that, and trying to stay calm in those situations can be difficult because it happens so much.
Mhm.
But me being used to it now, I feel like I can handle it in a safe manner for him. So that's what
Yeah.
matters.
Mhm, for sure.
Um, so, what do you think are some ways that these parents or caregivers can respond more effectively and compassionately when their kids are already in that type of behavior situation?
Mhm. I think a good way to respond, like I kind of like what I touched on earlier, is just
Hmm.
like stopping and pausing and thinking about why they're doing it, and then just thinking like,
Right.
okay, how can I help them
Hmm.
regulate their nervous system? And
Hmm.
I think um, thinking of it from that point of view instead of like, okay, they're doing this behavior, what consequence can I give them for this? I think like even as a teacher, whenever I first started out and I was familiar with the functions of behavior because of my past job, but I hadn't really got the chance to put it into practice in the classroom setting for
Hmm.
too long. Like when a child would engage in a behavior, I'd be like, what do I have to do now? Like what consequence do I have to give? Whatever. That's just kind of you know the first thing you think of as a teacher is like, okay, well, they broke something or they did this, now I have to do something about it. And once I got myself to like stop and think about like, okay, they threw that because they're frustrated from their math work. How can I help them? Maybe I can get my
Hmm.
teaching assistant to go sit next to them and go work with them. and help
Mm-hmm.
them regulate and help them do their math work. And then that's kind of a preventative strategy for um, that behavior to not happen again in the future. So I kind of encourage caregivers and parents from more of like a compassionate point of view to think like, how can I help them? Like, what is really going on here? Like, what's the core of it? And to even think
Mm-hmm.
like, kind of try to think um, a little bit deeper than you would naturally think.
Right. Like
So
critical thinking skills.
yes, yes, for sure. And like try to, really think about the nitty gritty details of like, okay, so and so is feeling dysregulated. They're really struggling to get their work done at school today. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
their parent texted me they had a rough night. Their baby brother was up and they didn't sleep well. We were running out the door this morning, so they didn't grab breakfast. Okay, maybe that has a huge play, in this behavior. And
Mm-hmm.
so I encourage like not only caregivers, but like teachers and school professionals as well to think about those setting events that um, kids might be going through. Because whenever we think about ourselves as adults, like if I don't eat breakfast, whenever I used to go in person to work,
Mm-hmm.
I would not be ready for the day. I would just be thinking about, how hungry I am. I feel like I'd be a little cranky, like not ready to start
Mm-hmm.
the day. And so we have to, remind ourselves that like things like that affect like us adults too in terms of our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that you can even think of it from the point of view of like, okay, well, how do I accommodate myself? Like for me, putting little sticky notes or little reminders around my house or setting an alarm for something help me remember to do a task. So then just kind of reframing that into like, okay, what kind of things can I do to, help my child be successful at home or, at
Mm-hmm.
school or at homeschool or in therapy or daycare, whatever the setting is. So just give yourself some grace. Remember, we all have things that we do to kind of help ourselves and help our nervous system stay regulated.
Right. Yeah, that's all really great ideas, the things that parents or caregivers can do. And days are hard. So not every
Mm-hmm.
day is going to be great and wonderful. Um, I mean, I know we can always hope that it will be, and that's how I try to approach every day when I get him up and get him ready. But, things happen. So I know for parents that I've spoken to, they feel very defeated, especially if it's a behavior that they've been struggling with or their child has been struggling with for a while. Um, I know that that can feel very disheartening when you try everything and it just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to get a fresh perspective as well, I think that that's important. Um, we have issues with transitions, and he's been that way since he got his diagnosis. I think even before his diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
But he's gotten much better. But I know that that was one that was really frustrating for me, and that is why we never really went out anywhere. We didn't do anything. We didn't go anywhere to see anybody,
Mm-hmm.
because that would
Yeah,
typically lead to a meltdown, and that just makes me overwhelmed, especially when we're out in public. So trying to
yeah,
get that fresh perspective and trying to, see what else you can kind of revise, I guess, in how you approach things. I think that that's
yeah.
important too.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah. So, well, we will kind of wrap up this episode, and I'll ask you a couple of closing questions.
Okay.
So what does your business mean to you personally?
Yeah, I named this business Little Wins Behavior Consulting because I do think that it's important to recognize those little wins and just find those little positives throughout the day.
Hmm.
And kind of like what you were saying, like, if you have a child that's engaging in the same behavior and you feel like you've tried everything and it's just
Hmm.
not working, um,
Hmm.
just one of my favorite things is to help parents or caregivers or school professionals like sit back and think like, okay, has this improved at all? Like, what's
Hmm.
one little thing that has gotten better
Hmm.
with this? Or even examples in the past, like if we have a child that's refusing to go to the bathroom and potty training has been really hard, like, okay, well, they got a little bit closer to the bathroom this time. That's a little win. That's a little positivity
Hmm.
we take for the day. So I definitely try to do that with parents and people as much as I can. So that was kind of the reasoning behind naming my business that. So that's kind of what that means to me. And I want to help, parents and caregivers just kind of find those little rays of sunshine and little moments of positivity throughout the day because it's
Oh,
very important. I think, it can help like parents' mental health. It could even help um, the child increase their positive behaviors if we're pointing out those little wins throughout the day to them as well.
oh yeah, we celebrate every every
Yeah.
little win possible. Hey, you got this done without having a meltdown. You know what? We're gonna celebrate it.
Yeah,
So
for
I
sure.
love
Yeah, you
that.
have
I
to.
think that that is really awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so what changes or improvements would you love to see in the community?
Oh, I feel like there's so many things. Let's just pick a couple. I think that honestly, every space in the community needs to be more inclusive. I know a lot of places
Mm,
have like sensory friendly hours. I think like Walmart does it. I know you had something set up with Deep Blue, things like that.
yes. Hmm.
I would love if they would like offer those times more frequently,
Right.
um, things like that. I just think that it's great that they're set up and that it's something that's happening now, but if it could be, I'm just making this up. Let's say the
Mhm.
Walmart hours are 8 to 12 on Sundays. Well, maybe there's, obviously there's parents that work during those times on Sundays, so they don't really like have access to that time
Mhm.
where they can, enjoy taking their child to the grocery store without them feeling like overstimulated and overwhelmed. So if they could offer it like other days of the week, I would love to see the community like try to be more understanding of people with special needs and kiddos with
Mhm.
autism specifically, be more understanding about kids who are non-speaking. I know I've heard stories in the past of people saying like kids are being rude or they're not responding or they don't have manners, things like that. And I think
Mhm.
it's just important for people to remember that they don't know what the situation is, and like even if you go up to a kiddo and they're non-speaking, like give them a high five or give them a fist bump or you know, they just because they're not speaking doesn't mean that they're not understanding. I think that
Mhm.
people in the community like make that mistake on accident because they don't know.
Mhm.
I encourage people to try to be a little bit more understanding and compassionate about that, and like still go talk to people, and go that helps them learn language skills and social skills and things like that. So those are definitely some things I would love to see in the community. And I think I saw somebody in your group mention a place where like individuals with special needs can go and like hang out and learn coping skills. I can't really
Mhm.
remember what it said, but just having
Mhm.
like maybe a big center or like somewhere
Mhm.
in Evansville where
That would
um,
be lovely.
yeah, it's really needed. And I know somebody said I think they have one in like Kentucky or something or Owensboro.
Yeah.
But that would
Mhm. Yeah.
be something that would be really great for Evansville. That's not like based on work or jobs. Like I know there's places here that um, will employ adults with special needs and like it's a workspace. But if we could just have a space that's like for fun or coping skills or like crafts or you
Mhm.
know just like
Right.
watching a movie together or just doing
Mhm.
something fun,
Mhm.
I think that would make a huge difference in the community.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I feel like you have to go to a really big city. And I mean, I came from Paducah, Kentucky. So I
Mhm.
think Evansville is a big city to me because, I just don't live, I'm not a city girl.
Yeah.
I live in the middle of nowhere. So that's what I'm used to. So I consider Evansville to be big. But I feel like since I'm here and I'm hearing what these parents are telling me, there is a lack of resources, a lack of support, especially for autistic teenagers and up until adulthood. And there is a lack of services for them as well. And I am a firm believer that every autistic individual deserves support. I don't care what kind of support it is, whatever they need to feel regulated and, to help them feel like, they matter, they still need support. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what kind of support it
Yeah.
is.
Agreed.
So that's a thing that's been on my heart lately. know that there's a lot more geared towards children, which is
Mhm.
important, but I would love to see it more for older kids and into adulthood because, they're still there too. They still need help too, you know.
Yes, for sure. Hmm.
And, I guess people think that, you can outgrow autism. That's not how that works. I've had
No.
people say that too. I'm like, no, that's not how that works.
Like, actually, no.
No, I'm sorry, but that's just not how it works. So, um, lastly, what advice would you give to parents who are feeling overwhelmed and defeated about their kids' behaviors?
Yeah, I would say again, like I mentioned earlier, like give yourself some grace. Go back to the saying, like not everybody's perfect. Even as a
Right.
behavior consultant, like there's been plenty of times where I probably did not handle a behavior as I should. Because again, like as humans, like your first natural response is to just like respond to the behavior. It's hard to stop and think about the function like every single time
Yeah.
that you see behavior. So yeah, give yourself some grace. Do even like 10 minutes of self care a day. Whether it's when your kids go to bed, taking a nap, at school, at therapy, whatever. Even if it's just like sitting in your car
Mm-hmm.
with no noise. I know I do that sometimes. My husband's
Yeah.
watching our son like on the way to the grocery store. Like it's just silent, and that's like my quiet time for the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I would say definitely that, and like even recognize like the little wins for yourself, like not just for your child and their behaviors. Like okay, well I handled that behavior a lot better than I did yesterday, or like I felt a little bit more regulated when I handled that behavior today. So that would definitely be my biggest advice I would give to parents and caregivers.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all really great ideas. And, to all the listeners, it is hard. I feel you. I definitely
Mhm.
feel you. I see you. And, consistency and working with these kids, the consistency matters. So even if you
Mhm.
don't see improvements as quickly as you would like, it will happen. It will happen
Yeah.
eventually. You just have
Yeah.
to be consistent with trying to, the maladaptive behaviors, I believe, are the hardest. And,
Mhm.
just finding different ways to help them navigate those maladaptive behaviors because we want our kids to succeed in all the best ways. So just remember consistency is key and you've got
Mhm.
this.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, yeah. So, with that, where can our listeners find you and your services, and how can families connect with you?
Yes. So I have a website. You can either Google like Little Wins Behavior Consulting Evansville, or my website is littlewinsbc.com. It has my email on it. I believe it has my phone number as well. You can call, but yeah, that phone number, send me an email if you have questions. There's also a contact form. So there's some tabs at the top of the page, and if you click contact, it'll have you fill out a form with like your first name, last name, email, phone number, and then you can type a little message. And I usually respond pretty quickly and try to get back to people like the same day or the next day.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me. But
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, great. And I will make sure to have all of her information listed in the description on both Spotify and YouTube for anyone who is interested. Do you also have a Facebook page, Gabrielle?
I do not. I'm going to, but I do not have one as of right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just put in the website then. So if anyone is interested in reaching out, you can feel free to click that link. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of Neuro-Spectrum Conversations. And a huge thank you to Gabrielle for joining me today and sharing your knowledge, your experience as well. If this episode has resonated with any of the listeners, be sure to share it with another parent, a caregiver, or an educator who may need to hear it. So thank you so much, Gabrielle. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I loved it. It was so much fun.
Well, I hope that your business really takes off and you get more clients because I feel like the work you're doing is amazing. Um, and offering these parent consultations as well. I think that that is super helpful to have. So keep up the great work.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. I will see you guys in the next episode. Take care.